Um, Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Yu Cao and I will I will be the moderator for this breakout room. Before we begin, I would like to take a minute to go over some ground rules to ensure all our presenters and guests have a positive and educational experience. First, we ask that anyone who is not presenting to keep their cameras and mics off during the presentation. This will help eliminate any background noise and distractions. Second, if you have questions or comments, please type it in the chat and we will go through them at the end during the Q&A session. Next, presentations need to stay with the allotted 15 minutes. When time is up, we ask the presenter to wrap up their points so we can move on to the next presentation. This is to ensure that all our colleagues have time to share their research. Last, we'd like to remind everyone that the session is being recorded. So wait a minute. I want to make sure that the session is being recorded. Okay, so I think it works. So I think the first person could start the presentation. Are you ready?
Yes, okay. I just see our slides up.
Okay. You can start. Yes.
Sure, thank you. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to our session. My name is Yassine. I go by he, him pronouns, and I'm a learning strategist at Academic Success at the University of Toronto. The title of our presentation today is Building the Teaching Capacity of International Graduate Students, Reflections from a Pre-Arrival E-Orientation Program. Before we dive in, I'd just like to give my co-presenters the chance to introduce themselves. So over to you, Mike.
Awesome. Thanks, Yassine. Hi, folks. Mike Kasperzak, Assistant Director at the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation at the University of Toronto, and glad to be here. I'll be driving the slides. Thanks.
Hi, folks. My name is Christina D'Amico, and I'm a faculty liaison at the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation at U of T.
Hi everyone, my name is Leon. I am a graduate of the University of Toronto and I collaborate with these wonderful folks on this project from the Student Life Center and the Teaching Assistance Training Program at the University of Toronto.
Hello, my name is Anya Ivanov, and the roots of some of the thinking with regards to the strengths of international students that you might have heard in my previous presentation have been planted in my role as a trainer for international teaching assistants at U of T with these wonderful people. So I look forward to presenting that part with you as well.
Great. So moving on to our introduction, we just wanted to give you a little bit of context and history around this program. So this is really born out of a lot of international student engagement over the summer, because when they get their study permits and their invitations, they usually arrive in the sort of chaos of orientation season. So we thought this would be a really great opportunity to start the conversation early in the summer via virtual programming. So whether that's workshops, spaces for mentorship. So we saw an opportunity here to really develop a partnership between Student Life, particularly the Center for International Experience and the TATP, Teaching Assistance Training Program, and try to really, again, start that conversation early, but fold in the experiences of international graduate students themselves. So here we have Liron and Sonia, of course, being our CIETA trainers. Everything rolls off the tongue. So we applied for a bit of funding called the ISEF grant, the International Student Experience Fund, which is to improve the experiences of all international students at the university. We were very fortunate to receive 3 years of funding, and we took a look around the university and saw that while there are many orientation programs, we didn't have one that really tackled teaching. So we talked a lot about transition in, like wayfinding, navigating the campus, but we really wanted to have these students reflect on what kind of classroom experiences they would be walking into and inhabiting that dual role of student and teacher. So we've kind of built out the programming in a couple of different ways, but we always return to this notion of mentoring, peer mentoring specifically, and we'll dive in to those pieces in a second. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Yassine. So I'm just going to speak a little bit briefly about one of the components of the program, which is a Quirkus shell. And for folks who aren't at the University of Toronto, Quirkus is our LMS. It's built by Canvas. So if you're familiar with Canvas or Canvas products, the example I'll show you on the next slide will be familiar to you. But essentially, we wanted to have a hub where international TAs could go and find these resources, not just at the start of their contracts, right when they're entering the institution and are going to be likely bombarded with information, resources, paperwork, whatever it might be, emails. But we just wanted this to be a living space where they could go and find information. So we had a glossary of institutional terms in the Quirkus shell for folks. We had asynchronous engagement set up, discussion boards. We really want to emphasize an ease of navigation, as I'll show on the next page. And Laurent is going to talk a little later about how we were building in some more synchronous interactivity into the shell. But ultimately, it was meant to be sort of an ongoing reference tool for folks that they would always have. So this is a sample page you can see here of the shell. We've got our buttons for the ease of navigation, a kind of welcome landing page. So it's really simple to use, and we've had very good uptake on it. And especially in this online context, a living resource can be particularly useful. So I'm going to pass it over to, I believe, Sonia.
Nope, that's me.
Oh, Laurent, never mind.
No worries. So basically, just to talk a little bit about the mission statement of this orientation program. So basically, we aim to support the transition of incoming first-year graduate students who would like to teach at the University of Toronto. We've had three main program goals. The first one was to address some of the knowledge gap that is specific to international students, as Yassine mentioned before, and that is not addressed by other orientation programs on campus. Second, we wanted to discuss the importance of intercultural perspectives with incoming TAs and introduce the perspective as an additional and useful teaching and learning skill at the University of Toronto classroom. And third, we wanted to discuss topics that may be specifically relevant to internationals in higher education environments, such as accents or diverse communication styles, in order to reduce anxiety as well. So our year one deliverables included 4 weekly webinars, 1 hour long, a resource hub, a glossary document that Chris also mentioned, and drop-in hours. And these were adjusted in year 2 to become a series of short videos with live Q&A sessions and guest speakers as well. So the next part of our program was the intercultural teaching circles or the workshop webinars. So I'm now going to hand it over to Sonia.
And those webinars that we designed and developed were webinars that aim to develop the intercultural competencies of all teaching assistants, domestic and international. We facilitated 2 webinars this year in the second year of the program, which were called Creating Interculturally Informed Learning Environments Online and Assessing Student Work in Culturally Diverse Classrooms and Labs. In both sessions, we wanted to challenge the participants to recognize the workings of organizational, regional, national cultures in their daily interactions and to develop strategies for communicating and understanding across these diverse perspectives. One of our goals was to demonstrate that intercultural training is not just for international teaching assistants and that intercultural competency benefits everyone, ultimately contributing to creating those equitable and inclusive classrooms. Further contributing to this argument was the very fact that participants could use these sessions towards the mandatory equity and access component of TATP certificates.
So next, we'll talk about another program that very organically emerged out of this work. One of the ways we tried to dissolve the sort of boundaries between domestic, international, intercultural, international is to try and create a community of practice where teaching assistants could drop in and just talk about some of the challenges, particularly in the virtual space during the pandemic. And we talked a lot about intercultural communication theory, but also wanted a place to critique it and speak very openly about what folks could relate to and what they might not, and moving towards the sense of intercultural responsibility and humility that everyone shares. It's not the burden of just newcomers, international students to have to do that. And one of the ways we did that was we had a guest speaker, a colleague of mine from Academic Success, who is an Indigenous learning strategist. And she talks about tailoring land acknowledgements to kind of move away from the rote acknowledgement that maybe we tend to read because we don't want to get something wrong or mispronounce a community's name, but really bringing the heart work to being a teacher or a facilitator and talking about relationship to land, what it means to be in right relationship with community. So this was something really exciting that we piloted, and we had some really good conversation coming out of that space.
Sorry, my computer is a bit slow. So lastly, we want to talk a little bit about our reflections as a result of this first year of the program. And coming into our second year. So in terms of our collaborative process, that involved a collaboration of numerous university offices, which provided us, the international TA trainers, with multiple support circles. We were also able to receive diverse feedback and consider many perspectives and factors when developing this program. We also held frequent team meetings in which we discussed and unpacked new materials and concepts. We reviewed university policies as they came up and considered how these should be addressed and introduced to new TAs via the lenses of intercultural perspectives. Some meeting time was also allocated to meet new partners on campus and consider options to expand this program. Lastly, as seasoned international teaching assistants, we both felt very excited about the opportunity to channel our experiences and expertise towards raising awareness of topics related to intercultural teaching and learning. It was our conscious decision to share from our own personal experience during all live engagements as means to spur discussion and offer support. We recognize that our team's diversity, both in terms of academic and cultural background, greatly contributed to our fruitful discussion, which led to the multiple program offerings.
And all of this demonstrated in one way or another our strengths-based approach to international students, which was further strengthened by the decision of the two partners to promote peer-based mentoring. As Liron mentioned, we shared our experiences in international students to other international students in order to support their transition to the University of Toronto, to clarify the expectations that their students might have from them, and to support them in building a community. In so doing, we aim to set up international teaching assistants for success. And finally, our goal was to begin a culture change that perceives intercultural competency as an invaluable transferable skill, one that is ultimately supporting all teaching assistants, all students, and their students. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And the next person. The last person, I think, is Antonica, or she is not here.
I don't think I see them in the list of participants, so they might be joining us a little late, but start the Q&A discussion. You can go ahead and do that, and then if Antonia joins us, they can do the presentation then.
Okay, so let's skip the last presenter and start the Q&A session. Does anyone has a question? Okay, go ahead.
Did you do some research about this first year program? Like how many international teaching assistant actually went through this first year, and what were their experiences?
So I guess the question refers to the orientation program at U of T.
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's the case, I can provide some metrics, and please, my awesome collaborators, if you have more information, please feel free to add. So, we've had a registration or enrollment rate of approximately 75 students. We are not sure actually if they all were international students or not. But they most of them were incoming TAs, or they were about to take their first TA position. We created also a pre-registration survey that all enrollments, all students who enrolled needed to take before actually being able to participate in the program. So we gathered some kind of like background information about their teaching experience and so on. The interesting thing that I'd like to share is that despite that the we've had 75 students enrolled, the attendance in the live webinars was relatively low. But what we did see is that many students went in the Quercus shell and spent a substantial amount of time going through the resource hubs and viewing the webinars even as the fall semester began. So throughout the month of October and November, many of our students went in the shell and kind of like dug through the resources there as well. So this kind of like shows us that this is, something that was had an ongoing use for them. So it's not just, kind of limited to the summer period. So that actually made us very happy to discover.
Interesting. So in a way, they would go to those shells when they need the information, and then just I guess read or work with those information to help them.
Exactly, and one of the assumptions that we had based on this experience is that at the time of orientation, student may not necessarily know the full scope of the information that they need, or as life happens, sometimes they realize they need the help of another resource that they didn't understand at the beginning. So yeah, as Mike is mentioning, we also recorded all the webinars and they were made available in the Quercus shell as well. So if students needed something, as kind of the situation arose, that was available for them, and they weren't unenrolled at the end of the semester, as sometimes is the case with those course shells. So they were continuously enrolled throughout the year.
This is a great program. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Okay, thank you for answering this question. I think we need to start the third presentation. Okay, go ahead. Do you know how to share the screen? Hello. Hello, you can start the presentation now. Please turn on your microphone. I believe that you can get started.
Hello?
Hello. Okay, finally.
Hi, sorry. Oh, you were speaking to me. I didn't hear my name. Sorry.
Yeah. I saw you just came and they're answering the question, and I think your colleague and he left. So I'm sorry that I texted you, but I don't think you saw the message. So let's start.
Yes, I didn't see the message and I wasn't sure which.
Okay,
Right.
okay, perfect. You can start.
Are we starting with presentation 3?
Yes, you are the presentation 3.
Session 3. Okay,
Okay, you can start.
great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well? Can you see us?
Yes.
Great. There's a lot of, the connection's a little wonky on my end, but we'll give it a try. Great. I will start by introducing myself and my partner, Guillaume.
Hi there, everyone.
I'm just going to quickly, okay, yes. My name is Antonia Macris, and I am currently an MA student doing my Master's of Arts in Educational Technology at Concordia University. And I do have a little bit of a background in continuous program evaluation, working on programs for students in higher education. And the topic we're going to speak to you about today is social media and learning through social networks, and expanding on that topic. I'll pass it over to Guillaume to introduce himself to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Guillaume Richards. I'm also at Concordia with the Educational Technology Division, and I'm currently in my summer break after my first 2 semesters of university, of my graduate program. And I was looking forward to presenting this idea with you guys. I would just like to know, how do I exactly share the slides? I haven't used Microsoft Teams yet.
You don't know how to share the screen?
No, is it similar to Zoom, where I just do share tray, I see, screen share?
I don't think so. There's a app narrow just beside leave. Do you see?
I believe right next to the leave button, when
yes.
you corner,
click it, click it, and you can share the screen, and you can upload your points or slides.
Oh, interesting. It may be different because I'm on the browser-based version.
I think it's different, yes.
In any case, let me try something. I'll get us started here.
Okay.
We'll find it. Of course we will. Educational technology and all.
We hope.
Yeah. It's great. It's great practice. The learning curve during COVID, all of these new platforms. We'll just jump in.
In fact, what it's saying is that I will need to restart my session in order to be able to share my screen, unfortunately. Let's try this just to see. Does that work?
Did you share?
Yes.
Sometimes it takes a minute.
I believe I'm sharing my screen. It says that I am. If I'm not, I might need to restart.
Yes. I will just okay. I will mute the notifications just because my mic will remain on.
Are you able to see that?
Yes, we can see that, and you can start.
Great. Well, I think it's Antonia that begins the presentation, so I'll pass it off to her.
Yes. Okay. Great. I will just quickly. Okay. That's fine. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. As we've introduced ourselves, I'm Antonia. This is Guillaume, and today we will be presenting on the topic of the evolution of social computing. We'll discuss a little bit of e-learning, informal and formal learning through social networks. Go next slide. Perfect. So to begin with an overview of what we'll discuss, we'll start by introducing the topic of social computing as a base context. Following this, we'll have a short discussion on the elements of Web 2.0 and e-learning specifically, and its evolution. And we will then follow by covering specific topics of how learning is shaped inside and outside of the classroom by using social networks. And we'll end with talking a little bit about how video platforms and Yeah, video sharing platforms play a role in learning through social networks. We'll go next. Okay, so let's begin, and we'll start situating ourselves in social computing. All right, so what is social computing? For all of us who don't know, in a quote by Erickson, the concept of social computing is defined as systems that support the gathering, processing, and dissemination of information that is distributed across social collectives. So where the information is not necessarily independent of people, but rather it's significant precisely because it is linked to people who are in turn associated with other people. As this definition exhibits, computing systems are considered platforms for social interactions. However, the key here is that it's important to distinguish that the focus is less on computer systems and their contribution to social activity, but instead to look at them as systems that manage information already embedded within a social context. And this helps to facilitate social interaction. So this understanding of the concept displays the important link between information and identity. And this is rooted in shared characteristics of us, the users, and the associations and groups that we form ourselves in digitally in these networks. So especially today, now more than ever, in the time of COVID, we've seen this increase significantly, and these groups are referred to as social collectives. They include teams, communities that we build online, organizations, markets, even cohorts, and more. It's important to note that this concept always goes back to the people, the users, the learners, and their or our collective needs and our individual needs. So foundationally, social computing systems follow a social architectural approach. They highlight the importance of initial design approaches in learning technology. So this portrays that the mechanisms help to transform all aspects of our lives in the way we learn, work, and play, and that topics in social computing are also researched on and worked on by a number of designers and scholars that contribute to this field from a wide range of disciplines. And these disciplines include, they're very interdisciplinary, ranging from psychology, sociology, computer science, even game design, and more. And such a variety really speaks to the importance of collaborating with interdisciplinary approaches within the field from the beginning. And I will now pass it over to Guillaume to further our discussion, to lead us into other elements that emerged from this concept of social computing that are the evolution of Web 2.0, web, and I'll let Guillaume go into it, and e-learning.
Great, thanks, Antonia. I'd like to start by looking at how the internet has evolved in recent years and how these changes have led us to new techniques and habits for learners. So the term Web 1.0 has come to mean the nascent internet that we remember from the 90s. Back then, building and hosting a website required a lot of effort. You needed a server to host information on. You needed experience in programming languages like HTML in order to build your website. And all these barriers meant that only a select few, such as the military and educational organizations, had the ability to publish content. Everyone else simply consumed this information. With Web 1.0, we had very obvious features such as basic web pages that relied on basic HTML, low resolution images, and annoying GIFs, like you can see in the first image there. Web 2.0 came about more in the early 2000s, and it made it much easier for people to contribute rather than just consume. All of a sudden, it was much easier to set up a personal website, and blogging and social media became massive influences on how we connect. As for what's next, we're moving rapidly towards a web that knows what we want before we can even ask for it. Neural networks have already made their way onto our phones and computers with tech like Apple's Siri and Google's Voice Assistant. And a world where we are connected not just through our devices, but through the technologies such as Elon Musk's upcoming Neuralink, for example, doesn't seem like a science fiction fantasy like it used to. So what we need to do now is ask ourselves how this might change the way we educate and how we learn. Now, as an evolution, e-learning has built on the technological advances we've seen from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0, whereas e-learning 1.0 was simply a distanced version of the traditional lecture format of classrooms. E-learning 2.0 incorporates many of the same ideals, such as democratized internet. It's less reliant on a top-down approach to teaching, such as having professor lecture content, and it instead encourages students' involvement and collaboration. Since many of these courses are taught asynchronously, meaning that learning can take place at each student's preferred pace, students are also expected to be more autonomous and form their own strategies for growth. Here's a few examples of tools that some of you may be familiar with at this point. Myself, as an educational technologist, I rely on a suite of tools to make e-learning more connected and engaging. This includes web conferencing programs, such as what we're using right now with Microsoft Teams, learning management systems or environments where we can learn, and interactive learning platforms. Now, in terms of trends for e-learning, we see some trends that are already starting to emerge in this new field. Basically, we have data analytics, which are sure to play a massive role in future e-learning approaches. With the increase in digitization of educational programs and resources, we are creating and storing a truly unprecedented amount of personal data in regards to student behavior and how humans learn. Examples of this can be macroscopic in breadth, such as aggregating test results across an entire continent, or incredibly granular, such as analyzing how long it takes for an individual student to get through a certain section of their homework. Another trend to look out for is the rise of informal learning. Whereas formal learning is considered organized and structured with explicit learning objectives, informal learning has no set objectives or outcomes and is generally classified as learning accrued through experience. So what we mean by this is, rather than students reading a textbook to further their understanding, they're now much more likely to turn to crowdsourced information found on popular social media sites. So I'll pass it back to Antonia to discuss the next section.
All right, thank you so much, Guillaume. And with that, I'd like us to jump straight into learning through social networks. And we'll talk a little bit about both the formal and informal settings, like Guillaume mentioned. So if we go to the next. All right, so learning with social media. Social media is, as we all know, a variety of network tools or technologies that emphasize the social aspect of the internet as a channel for communication, collaboration, and creative expression, and is often interchangeable with the terms Web 2.0 and social software. Now that we have just described some of the platforms that we use regularly and formally in our everyday lives, one learning theory that closely ties to the use of social media is the concept of personal learning environments, PLEs. So a PLE is defined as a pedagogical approach for both integrating formal and informal learning using social media and supporting student self-regulated learning in higher education contexts, but it's also seen in other levels as well. This concept is regarded as an emerging technology, and it has had a great impact on teaching and learning within education across the globe and internationally, as a PLE can be adapted by the individual learner according to their informal and informal learning needs. And some examples of these social media used for learning in such environments include experience and resource sharing tools, for example, that facilitate social discourse, which include examples of WordPress, Twitter, Reddit, or the creation of collaborative workspaces or media sharing tools that help facilitate social tagging. These examples include YouTube, Instagram, and so many more. So in looking at the variety of these, it's interesting to note that the social media platforms themselves have taken to develop in-house learning components, such as LinkedIn Learning, and how these platforms will be used differently depending on the audience. Audience will head to LinkedIn for more business and professional discourse, while Facebook is more of a community building. And you'll head to Instagram for visual-based content and information you want from there. So we can go next. All right, so formal learning with social media. So some characterizing themes of using social media in the classroom include openness, personalization, collaboration, social networking, social presence, user-generated content, which is something we'll talk about later, and collective wisdom. So reviews of social media integration in formal learning environments in the classroom have been varied. One criticism to use social media in higher education is by Hilton considered the challenge of Web 2.0 technologies and the perceptions that students the perceptions that students that are autonomous in their learning may risk not having a mediator for their thinking, their knowledge, or their online work. Another criticism considers fake news that the learner would encounter, and addresses the issue of their ability to ascertain credibility of the online information they see, and being able to critically judge or validate this information, which is very higher order thinking. Yes, so I see here that we must wrap up in a minute. So yes, so do you want me to pass it over to you, Guillaume, for a quick
Yeah, why don't we talk about the educational videos? Well, actually, I really like this idea of the case for social media in the classroom, because I think this really wraps it up succinctly.
Okay, so we could end with this point, and we did have some information about using videos, but that's something we could always talk about later on, or in questions. And so yes, so this is a case for social media in the classroom by Sohoni, and social media projects were used. So according to Sohoni, the use of social media in the classroom offers the opportunity to increase student engagement and active learning. It helps learners to build important critical thinking and technical skills, the skills that were criticism that we need to help learners improve, and allow students to be empowered and have ownership over the communities they engage with online. And in a case study, social media projects were offered as an alternative for students in the classroom to traditional papers. And in their use and throughout the study, the findings were as follows in terms of using social media for their assignments, resulted with 5 influential findings that are on this slide. Increased knowledge retention, better connection between academic real-world materials, more critical of messages consumed online, empowering the students, as we mentioned, and improving their communication skills. So we'll end it with that, and we hope that our presentation helped you better contextualize the importance of using social media, both in informal and formal settings for learning. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you all.
Thank you guys for the presentation.
Yeah.
Our pleasure.
We can start our Q&A session. Any questions?
Not all at once. No.
I saw someone is typing the questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Antonia, you're muted, actually.
Okay. Thank you, Guillaume. It says here in the chat, did Antonia and Guillaume want to talk a bit more about the video since it was cut short? We would be happy to, if that is something you're all interested in. If there aren't any questions right now, and we do have some time permitting, that I will let the moderator let us know, and if that's okay, we could certainly do that. This is my question. Good question.
Yeah, let me see how many questions that we left. I saw someone raised his or her hands, and yeah, I saw someone raise hands. I couldn't remember who.
Is there a hand? I don't see one on the side in participants, but if someone who's raising their hand would like to unmute themselves and ask the question, we can also take it that way.
Yeah.
If
or
not,
Hi folks, it's Mike speaking. Yeah, I did raise my hand and I was going to speak to what Chris said. Yeah, so great. Thanks, Chris.
Oh, same question as Christina?
Indeed, yes.
All right. Oh, now you're muted, Guillaume.
Sorry about that. I was going to say, if we actually have a 5 minutes of allotment that we could use, we could get through our remaining slides in that time, and I think it would benefit the group.
Yes, if you guys have no questions and really interested about their videos, we can spend. So how many minutes for the video?
Or just a few. I don't know. Not too much.
Yeah. So if you guys and also me really interested in the video, so we can play the video, I think.
Great. Awesome. Give me 1 second. I'll get that all sorted out again.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's not just a disclosure. We're not watching a video. We are talking about videos and how they help us learn better in different settings. So buckle up.
Can everyone see my screen all right?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you. So we've made it, albeit circuitously, to stage 4, learning through video platforms. I'd like to start by examining the role of edutainment content within these video platforms. What that basically means is edutainment is defined as any form of entertainment that has the goal of educating the consumer. While edutainment is certainly not a new concept, with the evolution of Web 1.0 to Web 2.0, we have new websites such as YouTube that have come to enable educators to reach larger audiences than ever before. Modern video content platforms offer everyone the ability to create content and disseminate it around the world. This has led to a surge of free educational content tailored to a variety of learning preferences. Some videos recreate the traditional classroom atmosphere, as we see here, with graphs and colorful labs. And some other ones don't at all. Websites like YouTube are designed to consume as much of your attention as possible, rewarding clickbait titles and employing recommendation algorithms to suck you in. That, in combination with the ubiquity of the platform, means that it's a powerful tool to engage learners and share educational content. Now, one very interesting aspect of this phenomenon is how this powerful engagement can be used to identify learners that want to go further in their self-regulated education. Platforms such as Skillshare market themselves as the next step in self-directed learning. For a fee, they offer quick videos in rapid succession and the allure of learning complex subjects from the comfort of your own home. This is far more convenient when compared to traditional courses where students are often required to travel to a lecture hall and spend 1 hour or longer focusing on just one single subject. What separates these platforms from websites such as YouTube is that they include a framework that offers clear paths for progression. And some even offer certifications for those who have completed courses, like in the case of Udemy. One main criticism against learning through community aggregated video platforms such as YouTube is the inconsistency in the quality and credibility of the content. So by producing content in-house with the help of subject matter experts, these new learning platforms eliminate this concern by ensuring a consistent and adequate level of credibility. While YouTube has its weaknesses, its value in this educational context is that it can be used as a funnel through which these new platforms can attract engaged learners that are self-motivated in the pursuit of knowledge. And that was our last slide. We just wanted to say thank you all for your interest. We hope that we were able to keep you entertained throughout this presentation, and looking forward to discussing more of these ideas in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Was that 5 minutes? Pretty sure? Pretty close?
I think so.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, we're open to them. And if not, happy learning in the rest of the conference.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a question in the chat box.
Oh, Mike, yeah, thank you. This is a great question. I love the manner in which you integrated experiential engagements into the program. 50-word exploration of identity as paragraph in a cover letter, interview materials for educational development jobs. You mentioned the emphasis on community. Did you do any follow-up with your participants or establish a community of practice? No, because I wanted to, and I was very, very eager to do that. But unfortunately, because I'm leaving University of Western Ontario, this was just not physically possible. But the idea was to think about the ways in which we could engage our international students in further programs. I want to believe that this community of practice that I wanted to create happened with the program on interviewing. So the way in which I envisioned the programming for international teaching assistants there was communication in the Canadian classroom, which was the very first level. Then teaching in the Canadian classroom, which was the program about which you all heard today. And then the next one was interviewing for teaching center jobs. So once you are comfortable in communicating, then they're more comfortable in teaching, and then they recognize that their potential and their strengths, and they begin to articulate them into their job materials with this interviewing for teaching assistants, interviewing for teaching centered jobs. So I want to believe this was somewhat like a community of practice, because many of the students who attended the first or the second, they moved on into the third program, but it wasn't done in that structured way. But that is a great question and a great idea. The program was 20 hours. So 6 hours of micro teaching for each of them, and then everything else was asynchronous. Thank you.
Thank you. And any questions?
I guess it's only the presenters at this moment.
They left.
Yeah, I think everybody else left, and it's just the presenters. So we could ask each other questions if you wanted to.
Go ahead. Mike, is this Mike?
I feel like I'm monopolizing the entire conversation. Folks, if you feel like you want to ask a question, I want to ask something of Antonia and Wilam around, I always struggle as somebody who also believes very strongly in educational technology and the use of educational technologies, and especially for use of social media and social media for networking, and sort of thinking of those informal ways, especially how students learn. I always struggle with the ways in which institutions impose very specific frameworks around how these things are supposed to use under, sort of regulations around confidentiality of student information, right? Privacy rules, data security, and the list goes on and on and on. So, what are your sort of thoughts on, both that sort of, and students doing this in spontaneous ways, right? And organizing themselves in that social media environment in spontaneous ways, and then institutions having to respond to those when situations or problems arise. But certainly being, such a critical component of learning. So I wonder, I don't have a question. I was like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Guillaume, are you there? I don't know if
I'm there. Yeah, I have some thoughts, but if you want to start, Antonio, you're more than welcome to.
I'll start off and then I'm going to throw it to you because I know you have more to talk about on this. I can kind of take a stab on. So I know that you didn't really ask a question, but I'll try to answer what I think of what I can share. I can speak to I don't know. I mean, are you asking more? Because I have more experience in higher ed and working, because I've worked as staff in higher ed, but also been as the student. I've seen how it works on helping, you know, students network and integrate and use all these things at that level. But, you know, I know that Guillaume can speak more to embedding social media in younger classrooms. So I'm not really sure, is your question more about networking informally, or how social media is how security is an issue, or how that's overcome in school boards, for example? Because I know Guillaume could take a stab at that.
So I am thinking of higher education, and maybe I wasn't articulating this well, and I put it into the chat. How can students and faculty use social media tools effectively with all the restrictions that universities impose on, let's say, data security, which is becoming a huge issue?
Mm-hmm. I can speak to that if you'd like.
Sure, start us off.
So my perspective comes from someone who's not only gone through several rounds of higher education, but also teaches secondary and elementary education. And it's my perspective and belief that the reason why we have such adamant regulations, such stringent protocols around data dissemination and data analytics in general, especially at the younger level of education, is because it seems to be, from my perspective, I think what's happening is that we are seeing these things that are moving very, very quickly. We have the rise of the internet in just a decade. We have, the rise of social media is in even less time than that. And as we all know, educational institutions, especially brick and mortar institutions, tend to move at a glacial pace when it comes to regulation. And so I can see how the reason why there has been such stringent regulation on these things is to address any potential concerns or any potential risks quickly, and then you have more time to figure things out before anyone gets seriously hurt, macroscopically speaking, of course. But with that in place, I think that these same regulations are indicative of organizations that don't quite fully comprehend where these sort of technologies are heading, and also they don't understand the ubiquity of these movements. So what's happening is that there's creating a bit of like a gray market or a black market for content, if you will, where students are saying we're not able to get these things through these institutional means, so we're going to create our own content. And that's what we're seeing with user-generated content across the globe. We see this on YouTube a lot with videos. Oftentimes I'll find videos of people saying, I created this video because I think this is a very important topic. I'd like to teach other people about it, but the way that it was taught to me was not well done. And so they take it upon themselves to create that content in a way that they find more approachable for themselves, and hopefully people like them. In terms of moving forward, I think what needs to be happening is institutions need to realize that these forms of education, these forms of communication, more generally speaking, are in fact here to stay. And, you can't just outlaw certain types of information sharing. Obviously, we need to have more understanding and more insightful regulation processes for how these things are being used and how students are allowed to have access to the internet. But that being said, I think that also comes about with the whole fake news things and critical thought theory, and how do we teach critical reasoning skills to these students? That's really what it boils down to in my perspective.
And just to tag on to that, having just from my experience, in the university setting, at our university in any case, there are on the staff side and programming for students, I have seen social media, using social media, optimize your use of social media workshops offered free, obviously, for our students from student service departments, for graduate level, for undergraduate level, kind of like extra, the student services that are provided. And there's a lot of different workshops on things like that are offered to students in general. Obviously, it's always the students who have to actually go out and take these opportunities, which is, that are there for the taking. But on that programmatic side, I do know in a university setting, it's tried to be at least available for students. But in terms of personal experience as a student using social media in higher ed, I've had a couple of classes embed social media in a way. In one class, we did a live Twitter dialogue on a topic. So we were able to, in one of our ed tech classes, but still, and we were able to, we did a whole session, a class session where we were just live tweeting about a certain topic and getting other, people involved on that topic and being able to share information that we've learned. Credible information that we've researched. So in another context, I spent a whole semester in a course in environment, so a different completely topic, but we were building, we all made Wikipedia wiki editor accounts, and we were able to find and come up with a story content based on credible research to add a page, and we all added a page on a topic that wasn't already existing on Wikipedia. So we were able to kind of add to the network and add content that is credible and push that into the technical, digital world. So I think where possible, trying to share the information and the knowledge that we gain and the credibility of the knowledge that we're interacting with every day as academics or as professionals in the field, I think is important. So even on the most informal platforms, there's always, I find, an opportunity to share credible knowledge if you can share it or have an inclination to. I think that's kind of my take. I think I went on a tangent, but that's something. I don't know if that helps. Okay, great.
We have 3 minutes left. So, any questions?
I mean, just to follow up on Michael's question as well, if I may. I think data security and data analytics in general are going to be the next big hurdle that we have to overcome as a technological society. That's actually something that I do delve in quite a bit with my other research, and we didn't have enough time to look at right now, but data analytics itself is just as frighteningly terrifying as it is powerful in how it can be useful. The granularity to which degree you can absolutely assess a person's capacities or abilities on a certain task, yes, can help them chart new trajectories in their educational growth for sure. But it can also be scary in the thought that we're, letting AI dictate trajectories for students, or, in terms of like the self-determinism of the student, for example. If a computer is telling them, oh, you should be taking these courses instead of those, then we're starting to get into some morally ambiguous territory. And it really just goes to reflect that these are still early days in terms of e-learning 2.0 or even 3.0, if we want to call it that now. And so it's in these moments that we have to be especially critical of the regulations and the processes that we put in place. One thing that I find very, very interesting is that we have entire multi-billion-dollar networks, mechanisms of selling user information, and yet very, very little regulation has actually gone into determining who owns this information. If the information that's created about you online is actually your own personal property or not, because it is just information about you, or if it's the person that created that information, such as Facebook, that owns the rights to it. So it seems to me to be a glaring omission in the process of actually cultivating, a safe online area for us to do these sort of things, if we haven't even defined the foundational building blocks of, the unit of currency, for example. then how can we properly regulate these things? It just seems like a glaring omission, and it's something that I think we need to look at very quickly.
Okay,